dance with a man, who's danced with a girl, who's danced with the Prince of Wales. It was simply grand, he said, topping band, and she said, delightful, sir. Glory, glory, alleluia, I'm the luckiest of females, for I've danced with a man, who's danced with a girl, who danced with the Prince of Wales.
I, Edward VIII, do solemnly and sincerely, in the presence of God, profess, testify, and declare that I am a faithful Protestant, and that I will, according to the true intent of the enactments which secure the Protestant succession to the throne of my realm, uphold and maintain the said enactments to the best of my powers, according to the law.
A marvelous scene. He looked just as he looked in 1911 at his investiture at Carnarvon.
Ah, you were there, Chips.
I've seen the pictures.
So have I. A pretty little prince. But if he still looked like that, it'd be a case of arrested development.
Now, you don't have to take me so literally, Wallis.
I'm sorry, Chips. I'm afraid I'm taking everyone literally these days. It comes of spending too much time with lawyers.
Never mind, my dear. That's all over now.
Sometimes I wish it had never started.
Do you really, Wallis? I can well understand that. Divorce isn't at all smart in England. They prefer adultery here, at least in the upper classes.
How like you, Chips, to be so astute. As a matter of fact, I was just trying to save certain people trouble or scandal.
How very quixotic, Wallis, dear. But be careful. Quixotry isn't smart either.
I'm no longer concerned with notions of fashion. You know, Chips, you really should have invited the king tonight. He'd have enjoyed coming out. He told me.
On the day he's just opened Parliament, he must have a score of engagements.
He's very good at getting out of them. To be with people he really wants to. Cheers.
It's time that I made myself plain to you, Walter.
And I'm sure you've told me everything I should know, sir.
No, I haven't. I mean to marry Wallis.
That wasn't quite what she gave me to understand, sir.
Well, whatever she may have said, or whatever you may have been given to understand, that is what I mean to do. You see?
Does Mrs. Simpson mean to marry you, sir?
I shall marry her.
Well, not for 6 months. Her decree doesn't become absolute until April the 27th.
And then once the decree is absolute?
Wouldn't it be wiser to say nothing, sir? After all, you've no need to commit yourself before April.
But I am already committed. I'm deeply committed, Walter. And honor requires that I say so aloud. I cannot go forward to the coronation without making myself plain.
Diana, oh, how lovely to see you. I'm afraid I'm horribly behind time. I was 2 hours at the hairdresser's.
You look absolutely radiant, Wallis.
Well, I should. It certainly took long enough. Mary, I'll be as quick as I can. If you just come in, I'm afraid that the room is a mess.
Sure it isn't. You know, the whole of London is agog with talk of your sparkling jewels and conversation.
Well, there wasn't much opportunity for conversation at Felixstowe, so I think I'm making up for it now.
You'll be pleased you're being discussed and admired at all the dinner parties.
Not criticized.
Well, of course. But never mind. Isn't it wonderful to be back?
Oh, it's simply marvelous. Oh, Felixstowe is a beautiful village, but an English provincial town off-season isn't exactly my idea of an exciting life. I'm glad the Ipswich episode is over. It was a strain being away from London and the king and all my friends. Thank you.
It's all in the past now, Wallis. And there's been hardly a mention of it in the papers.
Well, why should there have been? And Ernest was simply marvelous about the whole thing.
Most divorces are undefended, you know. It's considered caddish for the man to behave any other way.
Diana, I know I have very little knowledge of English life and even less of your quainter customs, but I am learning. Divorces are the same in America, except they take less time.
6 months will pass in a trice, Wallis. You wait and see.
Yes. But why the waiting period in the first place?
The decree nisi was originally provided in case a child should be born to a divorced wife.
Another one of your quaint customs. There's no fear of that. At Felixstowe, I lived next to a school, and I had my fill of children. Home again, and Aunt Bessie is on her way from America. Oh, I've had so many invitations, I simply don't know how I'm going to fit them all in.
You will, Wallis. You're quite the best organizer I know. Now, how's the king? Duff said he's looking very well.
He is. Of course, he's very busy. But then you'll see him tomorrow night at Emerald's.
Of course I will.
Now, I am taking you to lunch at Claridge's.
How lovely.
An opportunity to tame the sable.
The simple question is this, Prime Minister. What does His Majesty intend?
I'm afraid that there is no simple answer. A glass of sherry?
Yes, thank you. You don't think the King would be content merely to carry on with this close relationship?
I just don't know, Attlee. You see, given discretion on his part and forbearance on the part of the press, the situation might be held for a time.
But is there to be discretion on his part?
I'm afraid I wouldn't like to guarantee that.
No. I remember when we were at the Accession Privy Council, you expressed your anxiety about the future and doubted whether the new king would stay the course. I'm not a reader of the American press, nor am I much interested in society gossip. But I spoke to Walter Citrine soon after he returned from America.
I had a word with him, too. I wanted a sounding from the trade unions.
And you'll know that during his recent visit, he was humiliated by the discreditable newspaper stories about the king. If you want a sounding from me, the Labour Party will not countenance the idea of Mrs. Simpson becoming queen.
Wet, gentlemen, isn't it? Very wet. I only hope I look as trim as you do.
So what it comes down to, Prime Minister, is this. The press can no longer stay silent about Mrs. Simpson unless we have your assurance that the government has the whole matter firmly in hand.
You have my assurance.
You do know, Prime Minister, 2 affidavits have been filed.
Yes, I know, on grounds of alleged collusion.
But I still have your assurance that the government has it all firmly in hand.
If the King's proctor were to intervene in the Simpson case, and if the decree nisi were not made absolute, then Mrs. Simpson would still be married, and that would put an end to all and any speculation about her marrying the King.
There would still be the romance.
Romances are more perishable than marriages.
So we may hope. But meanwhile, the press are bound to comment soon.
We have the matter in hand.
Mrs. Merriman, ma'am.
Aunt Bessie.
Oh, Wallis, honey.
How wonderful to see
Oh,
you.
my darling.
How was the trip?
Just wonderful. My, let me have a good look at you.
It's so good of you to come to the port so quickly.
Oh, family must stick together. Besides, it's not the first time. My, it's so good to be back at the fort.
I'm afraid you're in for a rather miserable time.
Well, we'll soon change all that. I made a promise to your mother when she died, and I'd do what I could to take her place, so here I am. Where's the King?
Reviewing the fleet.
What's the trouble, Wallis? What's the matter?
I almost feel like I'm taking sanctuary here.
What can you mean, my dear?
No, I mean I've come here to escape all the wagging tongues.
Oh, tongues have wagged at you ever since your first divorce. You should be used to them by now.
Well, it's never been this horrible before.
Whose tongues?
Everyone's, my friends included.
Well, then they can't be true friends. They're simply envious. It's always been. Remember, you're a Warfield from Maryland. That means something.
Well, you don't know the English. To them, it means I'm an outsider. And worse.
Oh, never mind, Wallis, honey. Now you have me to count on.
Oh, yes.
Come in, Alec.
Thank you. I've just had a long meeting with Dawson, Prime Minister. He showed me a strongly worded leader he'd written for the Times.
He's not going to print it.
For the time being, no, but he warned me the press could only be held for a few days more. Naturally, he wants the Times to be in the forefront. I understand that you're shortly about to have a meeting with your senior ministers.
Yes, I am.
Now, I've written a letter to the King, urging him that his only course, if he is to avoid a head-on collision with his ministers, is for for Mrs. Simpson to go abroad as quickly as possible. Now, are you prepared to postpone your meeting with your ministers until I have a reply from the King to this, the moment he is reviewing the fleet?
It can be postponed no longer. The pressure is overwhelming.
Can you play Tipperary? It's a long way to Tipperary. It's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly. Farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there. Evening, Osborne. Have my bath drawn, please. I'll take a tub right away.
Yes, Your Majesty. Major Harding asked me to tell Your Majesty that he left a letter for you in your room.
Major Harding, a letter? Oh.
So I understand, Your Majesty. He was most anxious that you should read it without delay.
Oh, damn. Damn and blast.
Sir, with my humble duty. As Your Majesty's private secretary, I feel it my duty to bring to your notice the following facts, which have come to my knowledge, and which I know to be accurate. 1. The silence of the British press on the subject of Your Majesty's friendship with Mrs. Simpson is not going to be maintained. It is probably only a matter of days before the outburst begins. If Your Majesty will permit me to say so, there is only one step which holds out any prospect of avoiding this dangerous situation, and that is for Mrs. Simpson to go abroad without further delay. Owing to the changing attitude of the press, the matter has become one of great urgency. I have the honor to be, sir, your humble and obedient servant.
Sir? Sir? Sir, is Your Majesty quite well?
Tell the ladies, would you, that I shall have the pleasure of joining them presently.
More coffee, David? More coffee?
Yes, please.
You seem a long way off.
Now, I was thinking. I shall have to leave you again tomorrow morning.
But you've only just come back.
But I have to.
David, you're tired. You need a rest. Can't you say that you're ill, that you caught a cold at sea?
To plead false sickness is to tempt Providence, Wallis.
Yes, that's quite right, Aunt Bessie. But tell me, how does one placate Providence?
I suppose by telling the truth, sir.
Yes. Hope you're right.
As Your Majesty no doubt knows, the resignation of the government would result in Your Majesty having to find someone else capable of forming a government which would receive the support of the present House of Commons.
The only alternative remaining is a dissolution of Parliament. and a general election in which Your Majesty's personal affairs would be the chief issue. And I cannot help feeling that even those who would sympathize with Your Majesty as an individual would deeply resent the damage which would inevitably be done to the crown.
Well, don't you rather think that the Prime Minister could have had a hand in that?
Yes, well, there must have been some discussion between them, sir.
I agree. Well, then, according to Alec, the government is threatening resignation, which would mean a general election and the issue of my private life, endangering the crown and the empire. But can this be true, Walter?
I think it could be true, sir, but I don't think it is quite true, quite yet.
What do you think he's trying to force the issue?
Well, I think it'd be more accurate to say, sir, that he's trying to force you to face the issue.
He wants me to send the woman I love away from my own country?
Yes, I think he's too blunt, sir.
But do you think he's wrong?
Well, I think he's lacking in tact.
So do I.
In sympathy.
I can't trust a man who overrides my private feelings like that. And I won't put confidence in a private secretary who adopts his bullying tone.
Yes, it is unnecessarily harsh, sir.
It's intolerable, Walter. Now then, look here. As my friend, would you take on the job of being my advisor from now on?
Well, I already am, sir.
No, I mean speak for me, to the Prime Minister. To be quite honest with you, I'd much rather you did it than Alec.
Very well, sir.
You see, his letter forces the issue. Now, I tell you, I feel moved to dismiss him.
Oh, you mustn't dismiss Harding, sir. If you do, it'll become known that you've had a breach over Wallis. And you must retain him. And be patient. But if you wish, sir, I will go between you and the government from now on.
Thank you, Walter.
Sir.
Well, now, his letter says that I send Wallis away. We agree he's too blunt. But could he be right?
Well, it would put an end to the crisis, if not entirely to the scandal. Some would say it's your duty.
Would you say that?
Not many days ago, sir, I asked you if you intended to marry Wallis.
I do.
Then I must ask you again, sir, does she wish to marry you?
She'd like to please me, Walter.
Then she would leave England if it pleased you?
Well, wouldn't please me.
Even though some would say it's your duty? Even though it would avert a looming crisis? Well, then I can only repeat what I said before, sir. But you must wait and see.
I don't feel that I can do that, Walter. I cannot, in honor, let the day of my coronation draw closer without making my intention plain.
Well, you still have supporters, sir. In Parliament, there's Winston. He'll be loyal.
Yes, I'm sure he would, but again, I can't put that loyalty to so bitter and unfair a test. No. Walter, I shall send for Mr. Baldwin very soon. And I shall say what must be said.
What a shame you missed the king, Sybil. He won't be back until tonight, and I'm afraid the fort is rather quiet without him. It's not at all like those gay, carefree summer weekends.
Oh, there'll be plenty more of those, Wallis. This is a chance for us to have a quiet little chat on our own.
You're so kind to try and cheer me up, Sybil. Aunt Bessie has certainly been doing her best.
Oh, Aunt Bessie, how nice.
How nice to see you, Lady Colfax.
Sybil, would you like some sherry?
Thank you, dear. Dry.
Aunt Bessie?
Yes, please, dear. Come along in and get warm. Oh, yes. I've been showing Wallis some cuttings from back home, Lady Colfax.
Oh, really?
Every newspaper's on her side. Not a word of censure in one of them.
Which is more than I can say for my so-called friends here. They're at me all the time to do my duty.
And what is that, my dear?
To go away?
Yes, to leave.
Without telling the king?
Some say yes, and some say no. After a while, I stopped listening and decided to come here.
Tell me, my dear, what prognosis has he given you of your situation?
Prognosis, Sybil? I believe the word means the probable forecast of the course of the disease. What they don't understand is that if I went away, the king would follow me regardless of anything. And then there'd be a far worse scandal than there is now.
Has the king ever suggested marriage, Wallis?
No.
Oh, I think I know the reason for all this hostility. You see, the upper classes mind your being an American far more than they mind your being divorced.
And the lower classes, Sybil?
Oh, they don't mind your being an American. Oh, no, dear, no. But of course they do mind that you've had 2 husbands already.
Whichever way, it seems I just can't win. There is only one step which holds out any prospect of avoiding this dangerous situation, and that is for Mrs. Simpson to go abroad without further delay. So this is Major Harding's point of view. If you agree with him, perhaps I should take the hint and go.
Devil take is more than a hint.
His advice, then. Could he be right, David? Perhaps if you think he's right, you should send me packing.
His advice is damned impertinent, and I shall not heed it.
Others may.
But they cannot send you away, Wallis.
Can they send you?
That remains to be seen. I shall see Baldwin about that tomorrow.
I just don't understand, David. You're the king.
But the government have all the power, Wallis.
But you must have rights. Can't you stand up for them?
Well, yes, I have rights. As king, I shall marry whom I choose.
Have you spoken to Major Harding?
No.
Will you?
No, and I shan't pay it the slightest attention. And there's absolutely no question of your leaving the country.
Australia is deeply concerned, Prime Minister. I have already spoken to Queen Mary and written to the Duke of York about this matter.
And your own Prime Minister, what view does he take?
There would be no doubt about it. Mr. Lyons is a Catholic and a devout one, so there's no question of his supporting a marriage to a divorced person. And he would accept it least of all from his monarch. That's why I have delayed pressing my Prime Minister.
When I saw the King at the fort, I told him how anxious I was about opinion in the Empire, and this is what I'd like to discuss with you, Mr. Bruce.
It would be madness if he contemplated marrying the woman. Did you discuss this with him?
He did not say he was thinking of marriage.
But is he?
He didn't talk of it.
You must acknowledge that there's evidence to show it is a possibility.
I talked to him about the damaging effect that his behavior was having both here and in the Empire, and appealed to him to mend his ways.
And do you think he will mend his ways, Prime Minister?
I was confident that the position would gradually right itself and that there would be no need for further action. But now I'm not sure.
I see.
My policy has been to give the king time to reconsider his position.
But now, clearly, it's working against you. You must ask the king if he intends to marry the woman, and if he says he does, tell him what the consequences are. That the people would not accept her as queen and would demonstrate against them both. Warn him that the House of Commons would probably take drastic action regarding the civil list. The king will understand that. And that it would be impossible for him to resist the demands for his abdication.
I've tried to exercise a fatherly influence to help a young man for whom I care a good deal. I think I understand his feelings. He's under a strong emotional stress, which I do not think will prove to be lasting. He's not yet aware of the conflict between love and duty, and I would go to any extreme rather than drive him from his throne.
Would you be prepared to resign, Prime Minister?
I should consider it.
What would you resign for? To prevent him marrying, or to force him to break off relations with her?
My sympathy for him does conflict with the most important consideration. It is essential to protect the crown against any taint or controversy.
You must admit that the Empire has been involved from the beginning.
That is why I asked you here today, High Commissioner. The dilemma is quite clear to me. If I do not force the issue now, the king may act imprudently. If I do press the matter, I might cut him off from any hope of reprieve. I still believe that I am right in preferring to wait.
You cannot decide what to do until you know the king's intention. Does he or does he not intend to marry her?
I cannot answer that with any certainty.
It is imperative that you find out. What you need, if he doesn't intend to marry her, is a safeguard that the decree would not be made absolute. And then the king would have to be weaned away from her or persuaded to behave with more discretion. If he does intend to marry her, you will have to advise him to abdicate, and unless he accepts this advice, the government would have to resign.
I've had the same advice from Neville Chamberlain, who thinks I should take a hard line with the king.
Good. And what is the opinion in Canada?
They've been deeply hurt by the tittle-tattle in the American press. Canada feels that the monarchy is the one stable center of the empire, and they dread anything that might weaken it.
That's Tweedsmuir. Then I'll leave you with this thought, Prime Minister. As far as Australia is concerned, if there is any question of marriage with Mrs. Simpson, the king would have to go. I'll send you an aid memoir recounting our conversation, Prime Minister. Something to ponder on and to help you to decide.
Thank you. Everyone is most kindly helping me to decide.
Alec, ask the Prime Minister to come to the Palace at 6:30 this evening, would you?
Yes, very well, sir.
And, ask the Attorney General to come in now, please. No, before you do, put through a telephone call Lord Beaverbrook, will you?
Sir, Lord Beaverbrook is on a liner on his way to New York. Might be rather difficult to get hold of him.
Is he? Oh. Well, nevertheless, let's arrange for a radio call to be put through to him on board.
Yes,
and ask the Attorney General to come in now, please.
Yes, sir. Sir Donald Somerville, sir.
Good afternoon, Sir Donald. Very good of you to come here.
Sir.
Do please sit down.
Thank you, sir.
Sir Donald, I wish to put you some questions, to which I believe I know the answers, but would like you to confirm them for me.
Certainly, sir.
Is the Sovereign of England free to choose his own consort?
Two views are tenable, sir. The first is that the sovereign may marry anyone who is approved by the government. The second, rather less precise, is that he may marry any woman generally regarded as suitable.
And what makes a woman unsuitable? Her being a commoner?
Not necessarily, sir. Being divorced.
Well, now, suppose that the government would approve a marriage, despite the woman's being divorced.
They could not approve such a marriage, sir. No clergyman of the Church of England would consent to marry the king.
The civil marriage?
Unconstitutional for the monarch.
But again, suppose that such a marriage took place.
The Archbishop of Canterbury would refuse to crown either of them.
And if the marriage were made or mooted after the coronation?
Then, sir, the king would be dishonored.
Yes, of course. I see. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, sir. Lord Beaverbrook is on the telephone.
Ah, do please sit down.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ali, for arranging it. It can't have been easy, I know. Hello? Hello? Lord Beaverbrook? Ah, yes. Look,
can you be back in England? Well, no, I need your help. Yes. What? 2 days to reach New York? Ah. Well, look, I wish you'd turn round when you get there and sail back. Well, no. There's a most dreadful row boiling up here. Well, that would be possible. What you say? The 26th? Oh, good. Oh, yes, good. Good, and thank you very much.
They simply will not leave him alone.
Have you thought that they could be right?
Right?
About your going away? No, don't look like that, Wallis. Just hear me out. You're miserable. The king is being hounded, the British government is disturbed, and the whole country is about to be scandalized. Well, perhaps only one thing is needed to set all this to rights.
Bessie, the king won't let me go.
So you stay, Wallis. What'll happen?
He's the king. It's for him to say what will happen in his kingdom.
His kingdom could reject him. They've turned kings out of England before now.
They were tyrants. This king is loved. Oh, Bessie, look at the faces in this picture. What do you see? I see adoration. Reject him. People love him. The government wouldn't dare turn him out.
Excuse me, sir, the Prime Minister's here.
Oh. Well, Mr. Baldwin's early. Show me the top of 6, will you? Yes.
The fort, please. Hello, Wallis. I've just got a minute. How was your day? Oh, how lovely. Was that fun? Wish I'd been there. Wish I was there now, but...
The Prime Minister,
Wallis,
sir.
Of course I would, yes. Yeah. I've got to go now. Goodbye. Good afternoon, Mr. Baldwin.
Good afternoon, sir.
Now, I understand, Prime Minister, that you and several members of the cabinet have some fear of a constitutional crisis developing because of my friendship with Mrs. Simpson.
That is true, sir. This friendship of yours, it is not one that the cabinet or the country approve.
Won't you sit down?
Thank you, sir.
Would they approve of my marriage?
I do not think that this marriage is one that would receive the approbation of the country.
Good gracious, you sound like the Archbishop.
Sir, the position of the king's wife is different from the position of any other citizen. That is part of the price that the king must pay. His wife becomes queen, and therefore in the choice of queen, the voice of the people must be heard.
Then I want you to be the first to know that I've made up my mind, and that nothing will alter it. I have looked at it from all sides, and I mean to abdicate to marry Mrs. Simpson.
Sir, this is a very grave decision, and I am deeply grieved. The thing is not worthy, sir. Even in its own terms, the divorce is not sound. There are those even who say that a decree nisi should never have been granted. There are affidavits out. The king's proctor may be called upon to investigate.
Any investigation must sooner or later come up against my part in the affair, and that must stop, Prime Minister.
Well, sir, I do not know how all this may stand. See here, sir. Personal letters to me. From Mackenzie King of Canada. It is the throne that holds the empire together. Bruce of Australia says much the same thing. So what you are proposing would break up the empire.
If the British Empire is worth preserving, it will survive without me. I intend to marry Mrs. Simpson as soon as she is free.
Think of your duty, sir.
I have a duty to Mrs. Simpson. To marry her as I promised to. If I could marry her as king, then well and good. I would be happy and a better king.
Sir, you cannot marry her and stay as king.
In that case, I shall go.
Sir, you must not.
My mind is made up, and I shall abdicate in favor of my brother. I shall tell my mother and my family this evening. So please don't mention my decision except to trusted privy councillors until I give you permission.
I can hardly bear to hear your words, sir.
Well, I can hardly bear to say them. Goodbye, Prime Minister.
Goodbye, sir.
I mean to marry her. That is all I can say, Mama.
I've dreaded hearing something like this for months past. How are you to justify yourself? To me? To your family?
I love Wallis.
Love? What is love compared with duty? Are we to think only of you? All those sacrifices made for this country during those long, terrible years of war by loyal and simple men. And now you, their king, cannot make a far lesser sacrifice.
I'm going to marry her, Mama, because what matters now is our happiness. And if I have to, I shall abdicate.
You will desert?
No, I shall resign. For the sake of someone I love, more than anything else.
Have you condescended to hear what the Prime Minister may have to say?
Yes, I have. He doesn't understand my feelings. Please, Mama, won't you let me bring her to see you?
I have seen her.
If you only knew Wallis, if you were to meet and talk, you would then understand how important
I
she is.
understand well enough. My son intends to desert his country for a woman. Of course you may not bring her to see me. It's impossible. I cannot bear to hear you talk only of your happiness.
By tonight, the king will have told the Prime Minister and his family that he intends to marry me.
But you don't intend to marry him. Only a day or two ago, you told Lady Colfax and myself that there was no question of it. Are you telling Sybil and me the truth?
Why should I not have been?
Were you, Wallis? Had the king suggested such a marriage?
What matter? He has suggested it now to the Prime Minister, to the government, and to Queen Mary.
What'll you do?
What can I do? The king may command me as he commands them.
Well, Prime Minister, here's a pretty kettle of fish.
Well, ma'am, I don't know what to say to you.
I'd expected something of the kind for a long while. And I should have prepared myself to bear it when it happened. But now that it has, I feel so humiliated, so ashamed. There has been no real struggle here, no search after duty. Only talk of self, of his need for that woman. How can any woman do this to a man so brilliant, so full of promise?
The case is not without precedent, ma'am.
What will happen if he persists?
I would not wish to say this to you of all people, ma'am, but if he persists, I think he cannot stay.
And I would not wish to say this to you, Mr. Baldwin, but if he persists, he is not fit to stay.
So there it is, Bertie. If the worst happens.
No, David. It mustn't ever come to that.
But if the worst came to the worst and I had to go, well, it would, of course, make a great difference to you and to Lilibet. So I wanted you to know about it quickly.
Oh, David.
Do you want me to marry Wallis, even if I have to abdicate to do so? It's something I want all of you in the family to be sure of, is that if I have to go, I shall do so quietly and in a dignified way.
Well, Wallis, isn't this better being back in London?
It's rather less depressing just now than being at the fort.
How is he, Wallis?
Unaccountable.
Meaning that you don't choose to give an account to us?
Perhaps.
Excuse me. Chips, do you think I could go to Anna's bedroom? My tiara's giving me a headache.
Come this way, Dan.
Well, Sybil, at least that's one headache I shall never have.
Oh, you never know that.
It was so sad. Dreadful.
He is besotted.
Mrs. Simpson is a very clever woman.
But how could he let himself get into a state like this? With all he's been given. All he has to do.
She must be more than merely a clever woman. She's ambitious. She has total influence over him.
It's his doing as well as hers.
He's obsessed.
Look at the way he treated Bertie. He's not been consulted or kept informed. David's just used him, like that wretched business at Aberdeen this autumn.
Bertie will always do his best.
Of course Bertie will always do his best, but he shouldn't have to. He's been put into a false position.
And what is to happen now, Bertie?
He's asked to talk to some of the younger men in the government, like Duff Cooper. He thinks they might have more sympathy. That he might be able to talk them round.
He simply will not face the truth.
He asked me to see her, but of course it's inconceivable.
Yet he is my brother. If only I could help him.
He has had all the help he should need. He has had the upbringing, the training, the teaching that befit him as an heir to the throne of England. His father and I gave him these. If they do not enable him to do his duty, I cannot.
Mamma, could you not talk to him?
We have never been able to talk to each other. I have always loved David, but I cannot talk to him as a son.
So your mind's made up, sir?
Yes, I'm going to marry Wallis. The question is, how is it to be managed?
You've told the Prime Minister that you're ready to abdicate.
Yes, I've said if I must go, I will go with dignity. But then what I'd like to know, Duff, is how you as my friend see it all.
Suppose, sir, that you postpone your marriage. You can't marry Wallis for nearly 6 months anyway, because the decree isn't absolute yet. So why not put it off until after the coronation? A year or more, perhaps. And agree not to see her during that time. You could attend a Durbar in India. Give yourself time to think things over.
You think that with time I may forget her and her attraction be lessened? No, I shall not. Nor do I wish to delay our marriage a day longer than is necessary. For me, to be crowned and anointed, knowing that I still meant to marry against the laws of the church, would be taking the sacrament with a lie on my lips. That is a thing I cannot do.
Everyone seems to know more about the state of affairs than we do. We know nothing.
I cannot believe that, faced with the choice of the crown or this marriage, that David would choose Mrs. Simpson.
He wants her more than anything else, and he's used to having his own way.
That's apparent enough.
Is it possible he's promised Mrs. Simpson he could make her queen, and she's actually come to believe it?
Perhaps.
Then she's totally ignorant of British ways and the limits on the power of the king.
It's impossible to discuss the subject with him. David regards her as an inspiration. If only he'd see reason.
He's beyond reason, Bertie, or he would never have asked Mamma to meet her. What difference could that make? Even if she liked Mrs. Simpson, she'd still find it impossible to approve of the marriage.
You're right. A meeting would solve nothing.
Besides, your mother promised your father never to meet her. She won't break that promise.
So you believe the outcome is inevitable?
I dread it. For your sake. And for mine.
I don't understand him at all. I feel I've lost a friend. And now I'm losing a brother. It's all crumbling about us.
We must put on a brave face as Mamma is and continue with our duties in the normal way.
I wasn't brought up to be king. I'm totally unprepared for it. I've never seen a state paper. I'm simply a naval officer. That's the only thing I know about.
You'll manage, Bertie. We'll manage together and make the best of it.
Well, at least she's left the fort.
And the press is still quiet. It'll be interesting to see what line Beaverbrook takes when he gets back.
The king thinks he'll take his side.
But even Max can't muzzle the press forever. As it is, Dawson and the rest are only keeping quiet because they don't want to embarrass the king before he makes his tour of Wales. Thank you, Pollock. At least they're sensitive enough to realize that if he's to face that ordeal, perhaps he should be spared any other.
How long do you think this amnesty will last after he returns?
Not long. But long enough, I hope, for this match to be resolved.
Quite cheerful. These men are in work, sir. Have you work?
Yes, sir. If please God, I keep it.
Yes, Sonny, I'm your new king. These works brought all these men here. Something must be done to find them work. You may be sure that all I can do for you, I shall. We certainly want better times brought to your valley. And something will be done about unemployment. Something must be done.
Well and Sarah, Roma, Mortoil, Orrex, I walk, Wavamrid, and on Brian, but I was making every way the cross I did.
Alec,
Sorry to
dear
keep you.
fellow. Come sit down.
Thank you.
Well, a very good press, I think. I'm glad it all went off so well.
What on earth does he mean by these pronouncements of his, when he's already told the Prime Minister and his family that he wishes to renounce the throne?
Well, I think that a man under sentence isn't strictly accountable. He can be forgiven a little make-believe.
You think he will go?
Oh, yes. And I've urged him to get it over quickly and leave the country. How was he when you left him?
Curiously cheerful. He's dining this evening with Chips Channon.
My word, I've had a party. My word, I've had a spree. Believe me or believe me not, it's all the same to me. I'm wild with exultation. I'm dizzy with success. For I've danced with a man. I've danced with a man who, well, you'll never guess.